With Sony's flagship A95L QD-OLED scheduled to only become available towards the second half of this year, the step-down A80L is the first 2023 OLED TV from the Japanese manufacturer to arrive in our test room. After calibrating our 55-inch Sony A80L review sample to D65 white point, peak brightness measured 590 nits on a 10% window and 135 nits full fill, which is similar to last year's Bravia A80K, although it did go up to 650 nits on a 2% window. Because of Sony's conservative approach, the A80L couldn't match the HDR peak brightness of other mid-range OLED TVs such as the LG C3, let alone the Samsung S90C QD-OLED, which could hit 1000 nits on a 10% window at D65 white point. Instead of relying on static metadata for tone mapping, Sony continues to deploy always active dynamic tone mapping on the A80L, but because of the TV's lower headroom, trying to retain more specular highlight detail in 4000 nit content would inevitably lead to slightly darker APL or average picture level. The main strength of the Sony A80L was in video processing, spearheaded by class-leading native 10-bit gradation, which presented the smoothest gradients among 2023 OLED TVs without even needing to engage the smooth gradation decontouring setting. In heavily compressed material, smooth gradation worked well to reduce in-content polarization, though because the higher settings would scrub away fine detail and create an over-smoothened appearance, our preference is to use the least aggressive setting of low for watching non-pristine content. Upscaling was excellent, with this SMPTE RP133 test card in 576i appearing clean and detailed without excessive noise and fizziness, translating to beautiful presentation of high-definition real-world content. Even bit-stuffed standard def broadcast won't look as noisy and grubby as on lesser televisions. Sony's motion processing remained as polished as ever, even though we actually prefer how other TV manufacturers separate their motion settings into low frame rate and high frame rate interpolation. The Bravia A80L correctly performed 4:4 pull-down to present 24 frames per second movies accurately without telescenic judder, and if you are sensitive to the mild stutter inherent in 24p films, which is not helped by OLED's near-instantaneous pixel response time, then you can increase the smoothness setting to 1 to make panning shots appear more fluid without introducing significant soap opera effect or interpolation artifacts. Since the internal TV apps operate at 60Hz on Sony televisions, a combination of motion flow custom and film mode high was necessary to extract 24p cadence from Netflix or Disney Plus movies. Otherwise, there would be noticeable telescenic judder in slow panning shots. That said, when watching 50Hz broadcast material with mixed edits, film mode high would lead to occasional microstutter and tearing artifacts, which thankfully could be resolved by switching film mode to low. The good news is that the picture settings on Sony TVs can be saved independently per source, allowing you to apply the correct motion settings for various types of content on different inputs. Similar to that seen on most Sony OLEDs over the years, near black luminance on our A80L review unit tracks slightly brighter than reference, causing shadow detail to look a touch more compressed and indistinct. On a more positive note, near black flashing artifacts common to WRGB OLEDs were suppressed very effectively on the Bravia A80L. In fact, the cleanest we've seen on any Sony OLED outside of the Japanese brand's QD-OLED TVs. Sony has programmed its TPC auto-dimming algorithm well, such that prolonged, dark HDR scenes won't gradually become darker over time, unlike on some OLED models from other TV brands. Bright uniformity on our 55-inch Sony A80L review sample was outstanding, with no dirty screen effect or banding on full-fill gray slides, and only some mild pink tinting along the sides due to the WBE OLED panel. Like every OLED TV we've tested since last year, the Sony A80L did not exhibit any faint horizontal lines or what we call the Venetian blind effect on bright elements in HDR content. Dark uniformity was fairly clean by WRGB OLED standards, although image retention tended to linger longer on the A80L compared to most other OLED TVs. Otherwise, SDR color accuracy was superb after calibration, with an average delta error of below 1 on this color checker SG chart where 140 patches were measured, and no inaccuracies exceeding the humanly perceptible threshold of delta error 3, translating to cinematic colors in real-world viewing. For HDR, DCI-P3 color gamut coverage reached close to 100% in UV terms, whereas Rec 2020 coverage was 77%. With game mode engaged, input lag measured 16 milliseconds at 60 frames per second, halving to 8 milliseconds at 120 frames per second. The Sony A80L is still using the same MediaTek MT5895 chipset implemented on Bravia OLED since 2021, so only 2 out of the 4 HDMI connections are HDMI 2.1 inputs, of which one is the eARC port. Both HDMI 2.1 ports carry the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second, but only if you sacrifice Dolby Vision support to unlock FRL or fixed rate link signaling. New for 2023, you can summon a game menu overlay that sits at the bottom of the screen while in game mode, which, among other things, provides a toggle to engage VRR directly without you having to endure the convoluted process of going into the HDMI signal format submenu and manually selecting Enhanced Format VRR to enable 4K 120Hz VRR for one of the 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. Note that engaging VRR would lock the Sony A80L into VRR game mode, increasing the input lag to 21 milliseconds and 17 milliseconds at 60 fps and 120 fps respectively, according to our Leo Bodnar tester. Other items on the new game menu include motion blur reduction, black frame insertion, which is unavailable in VRR mode, a black equalizer setting intended to expose enemies hiding in the dark, but would affect even midtones, thus washing out the picture and so is best kept off, as well as a superimposed crosshair that can be customized to help your aim. The screen size reduction feature marketed at Sony's February TV launch event was missing on our review sample, so we're trying to find out from the company if it will be added via a future firmware update on the Sony A80L OLED. Thanks partly to the companion chip inside the Bravia XR processor, the Sony A80L managed to resolve full 4K 120Hz resolution despite the MediaTek MT5895 chipset. In HDMI 2.1 FRL mode, 444 chroma couldn't be fully reproduced, so if you really need full 444 chroma for PC use, you would have to fall back to HDMI 2.0 TMDS signaling by changing HDMI signal format to enhanced Dolby Vision, which is capped at 4K 60Hz. Talking of which, there is no Dolby Vision game mode on the Sony A80L to cut down the input lag, which came in at 150 milliseconds with Dolby Vision content. So together with the 4K 60Hz ceiling, we think Dolby Vision gaming is a no-go on the TV. Like on all Bravia XR TVs, the adjust HDR settings on the PS5 would be auto-populated upon first handshake with the Sony A80L. But since the automated process would set maximum tone map luminance and maximum full frame tone map luminance at 22 clicks from minimum, which corresponds to above 2500 nits, the resulting HDR presentation in HDRG compliant games would look more washed out with blown out highlights. Because setting HDR tone mapping to off would undertrack the HDR10 PQ EOTF standard, and there's always active dynamic tone mapping otherwise, our recommendation is to first disable HDR tone mapping on the TV, then set the first and second adjust HDR screens on the PS5 until the sun first disappears, which should take 15 clicks from the bottom. As always, the third screen should be adjusted all the way down to black. When playing HDR games, you should then switch HDR tone mapping to Gradation Preferred to restore accurate PQ EOTF tracking. VRR worked well to reduce frame drops and tearing artifacts, though some VRR flicker remain unavoidable in certain VRR games, particularly during more sedate scenes and on static menus. Native 10-bit gradation was very good judging from this gray ramp pattern from the Display HDR app, and unlike on LG OLEDs, smooth gradation still worked in game mode to reduce in-game posterization, although as mentioned before, we would refrain from going higher than the low setting to avoid an overly filtered appearance. Design-wise, the Sony A80L sits on a pair of diamond-shaped sticks, which can be installed in the wide position, the higher soundbar position, or narrower central position. Just like on the A80K last year, the anti-glare screen coating on the Sony A80L was semi-matte, contributing to slightly lower perceived contrast in a brighter environment. The OLED TV ships with a black remote control featuring direct access buttons to a number of streaming apps including Crunchyroll and Bravia Core, the latter of which is a unique selling point or USP for Sony TVs since its introduction in 2021. Thanks to streaming at much higher bit rates, and even IMAX Enhanced Expanded Aspect Ratio not available on other streaming services for a handful of titles, not to mention newly added Dolby Atmos support. The Sony A80L comes with 10 free Bravia Core credits, allowing you to redeem 10 premium movies in addition to 24 months of unlimited streaming within the platform's general catalog. Sound quality on the 55-inch Sony A80L was very good by TV standards, especially after running the acoustic auto-calibration function which measures your listening environment using the remote control microphone, then automatically customize the frequency response to the room. There's decent bass and dialogue clarity, with a highlight being the precise sound localization from the Acoustic Surface Audio Plus technology where sound is emitted directly from the OLED screen itself. Let's sum up. While it's largely a sideways move from last year's A80K in pure picture quality terms, there is no doubt that the Sony A80L is a refined OLED TV with class-leading native gradation, superb upscaling, impressive motion handling, accurate colors after calibration, and good sound quality on top of OLED's true blacks and wide viewing angles, and so it earns our recommended award. However, the Bravia A80L doesn't go as bright as other mid-range OLED TVs from rival manufacturers for watching HDR content, and its gaming credentials are let down by slightly higher input lag in VRR mode, only 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, and no proper HDIG support. If you are undecided about which OLED TV to buy, one place where you can get good advice is at Richer Sounds, a trusted British AV retailer with more than 50 stores in the UK, as well as a secure e-commerce platform for online purchases. The stores have plenty of the latest televisions on demo, and friendly, knowledgeable staff who will give you unbiased advice on your purchase. So visit your local Richer Sounds store or online at richersounds.com for your next TV purchase. Thanks again for your support. Okay, to get the highest bitrate and hence best picture quality from Bravia Core, Sony recommends a minimum internet connection speed of 115 megabits per second. However, like on all consumer TVs, the Ethernet port on the Sony A80L is only limited to 100 megabits per second. To find out how to significantly boost the wired internet connection speed on any recent Sony TV, including the A80L, after all, who doesn't want to upgrade to a bigger pipe? Please watch our explanation video by clicking here.